Exactly. Yeah, we'll explain all of that to everybody as they come in, because there were several adjustments that as we were going, and that's totally okay. It's what you got to do. We appreciate your being here, and this is, you can't see, but we're in Hillcrest, and they've got awesome technology with front and rear cameras and these awesome mics upstairs and the tracking cameras, so that when students ask questions, you'll be able to see who's asking, and so, yeah.
And you
It's
can
not
see the
quick.
blemishes on my face, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay.
Well, no, there'll be 6 of you, so it won't be that bad.
Need more people to join.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So you have Stephanie and Mike to thank, because they were going to be here in person and had to switch to virtual. So now there are 6 of you instead of 4. So you're a little more hidden. A few more.
So Stephanie, when do you go back, or will you go back to the office and work? Yeah, work downtown.
We're actually back. We're actually back in our office. I have a terrible cold and I sound like
Yeah.
I don't sound like myself as so I just am working from home, but our office is open, and I started going back a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi
Can
there.
they see
Oh,
us?
Here we go.
Yeah, so they can see the whole classroom.
Oh, hi you guys.
There he
That's
is.
All right. Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Andrew, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, hello.
Hello. Welcome. We have one more panelist to come.
Sorry I'm late.
No, that's all right. You're right on time. We hope a few more students will show.
Yeah.
Great.
But this nice day, I don't know, I saw a lot of
It
bikes
was
and
pretty
runners.
darn nice.
So nice.
We had
Exactly.
yeah,
Like 45 and sunny right now.
Right.
we had 17 with the RSVP, so
Yes,
we thought
we
that was
did.
pretty good. But
Yes.
we'll see.
And we'll record if, in fact, it looks like we may go already recording.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so recording is good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a few announcements at the beginning, so
Yeah.
maybe by the time I'm done, we'll see them come in. But
Andrew, I just got a chance to listen to that podcast you sent me. That was nice. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's Blair did a really great job. He's
Yeah.
absolute stud podcaster. So he made it sound easy for me, but
Yeah, no, that was nice. It was put together for everyone. I liked it.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Stephanie, I'll tell you, the daily is very popular here. A lot of more students than I would have thought listen to it.
That's good to know. It saves you from having to read. I was just reminiscing. I got my, I don't think it was a philosophy class. It might've been an economics class. I took a class where the professor quizzed us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal every morning. And that was like 20% of your grade. And
Oh, boy.
I otherwise would have honestly completely failed that class. That really took me long. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Blair, how are you?
Doing pretty well.
Doing pretty well. Working
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess. Bummed that I couldn't make it out there. Yeah, I was planning on driving up yesterday, and then at the last minute, this bill we've been working on had a hearing in Nashville, so I ended up having to fly out there to testify for 3 minutes, and then I was like, okay, bye. I guess I'm not going to Vermont. Not the choice I would have made, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah.
And there's Allison, great.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Allison.
All right,
Yeah.
there's our illustrious panel.
Yeah, good.
Shall I start with my stuff and? hope
Sure,
that
go ahead
more
and start.
students
Maybe
show up
some
and-
people come. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you to you all for coming.
Yeah.
I think they'll wander in, but I'll get started. So I'm Amy McGlashan, and I work at the Center for Careers and Internships, and part of what I do is academic outreach. So I work with academic departments like Philosophy to basically support the message that you can choose any major and succeed, that the liberal arts education will serve you no matter which direction you want to go. And this is one of the ways that we demonstrate that by bringing back alumni by major to tell their story of where they went from Middlebury and how they got there. And what you'll find, I believe, with all 6 of our panelists perhaps, is that it is never a straight route, or rarely anyway. And that's to reinforce that the liberal arts skills and the philosophy major can take you in a number of directions. Before we dive in, I want to talk about a few things. So another way that we tell that story, I don't know if people have seen these major guides. This is handy for when you go home, like for Thanksgiving, and they say, what are you going to do with a philosophy major? And you say, well, as a matter of fact, here are the learning outcomes for a philosophy major and what it's about. But on the back are internships and jobs that actual philosophy majors have gone on to do, and how the learning outcomes for the major turn into professional competencies that can be applied in a number of areas. So this is very handy. Parents love these. So feel free to take one. And they're always in our office for when you come back. I'm going to talk about the one-to-ones in a minute, but first I also want to mention Mid to Mid. Have you guys heard of Mid to Mid before? So that's our alumni network online, and you can access it anytime. When you following today, I think most, if not all of the alumni, and if they're not on by now, they will be after today, so that you can follow up with them and other alumni. Once you start having other questions, you can search by geography, you can search by interest, you can search by a number of things. It's, as a crude way to put it, it's kind of a cross between Tinder and LinkedIn, but it's our alumni, and they're here, and they're just on that database for you to reach out to. So we encourage you to check it out. There's a handout and other things on Mid to Mid, but you can just remember that. Because there are now, we just learned the other day, almost 6,000 of our alumni are on there. So that's a pretty hefty network. In fact, I'll just quickly say, I went to a Research One institution. If I had known the value of a liberal arts alumni base, that would have changed my mind right there in terms of what the value and what we can, for lifelong, how these relationships can sustain you and help you shift jobs and just think of the connections you're making here, and it's expanded that much with our alumni base. So the one-to-one chats, have people signed up for those? Do you know what these are? Oh, good. I have a fresh audience. So in addition to the panel talking tonight about how they use their philosophy major and how it connects to what they do in their lives and careers now, tomorrow, all but Andrew are available for one-to-one chats, just brief, informal. You don't have to have a resume. You don't even have to be interested in the career area that they're in. If you like something that they say, you want to follow up, go ahead and sign up for a one-to-one chat tomorrow. And again, they might be on mid to mid and you can reach out to them afterwards, but this is an opportunity. They've set aside their time. They are here for you. So by all means, this is why I bring hard copies of the schedule so you can see if there's a slot and you want to sign up before we close the schedule, if you will, for tomorrow morning. So I encourage you to do that. What I will also say is, while this is the field guide for philosophy, really, I think what you'll learn tonight is everything that they have to say. They'll say that everything they do is related to philosophy and nothing that they do is related to philosophy. And I think the message is, again, you can major in anything, and that the alumni have lots of rich stories to tell that have that are beyond what the major's about. And I mention this because we do about 10 of these field guides a year. So we just did American Studies and Linguistics, but we have 4 coming up in April in Chinese, religion, geology, and geography. And I mentioned that even if you're not taking a single course in Chinese, there still may be alumni doing something that's interesting to you. And you should always check out who's coming in the bios and see if there's someone you might want to talk to for the one-to-ones. You don't have to be a major to go to the event or sign up for the one-to-ones. Because again, they're all here for you. So I just want to leave you with that message. And I think that's all, unless my colleague Tim has anything to add.
Nope, just saying hi, everybody. I'm Tim, one of the advisors in CCI who works with Amy. Welcome, everybody. I also have the attendance, so I'm going to stand up and
Yeah.
let us know you're here. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to Professor Viner to kick us off for moderating, I just want to acknowledge my colleague Rachel, who you don't see because she's behind the scenes running Learnar, and my colleague Nicole, who does all the marketing, and they're the ones who work really hard to get the message out to you. And with that, I will turn it over and say thank you to Steve for the partnership.
Okay,
Okay.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, and thanks to our panelists, you are awesome. Totally appreciate it, I
Yay.
seriously do. It's fun to write those emails and to get such great replies. Yeah, it's a little pat on the back, like, hey, we didn't do so bad. You're off doing some great things. And maybe we had just a little piece or something to do with it, or philosophy does, or at least being a part of Middlebury College had something to do with it. So it's pretty cool to sort of connect myself in our department to what you all are doing. We really appreciate it. How about this, just for the beginning, then we'll just go around and we'll have you introduce yourself and then tell us, you know, what, yeah, I don't know, it sounds boring to say what your employer is, what you're doing, what your occupation is. Yeah, we'll do that. And then actually we'll do, how about let's do two things. Who's your employer? And what you're doing in that field. And then can you also say something like, what was a pivot point in your career? Where was it, like, where was a moment after Middlebury College where you said, oh, I want to do this, or I think this would be a good fit for me, something like that. So 3 things, huh? Who you're working for, what you're doing in that employment, and then where was a kind of pivot point for you after leaving Middlebury College? I'm just gonna go because this is the way I can see it. So when Stephanie, Aaron, Mike, Blair, Andrew, and Allison. So we can go that way. So Stephanie, you're up.
Cool. Hey, everybody. So I work at the New York Times. I've been there for about 8 years, which feels like an eternity. I can't believe I've been out of college for 8 years. I oversee basically all of the new stuff that we're doing at the time. So that's not all of it, but a lot of it. Some work we're doing to develop a product for kids between the ages of 7 and 12. That's sort of like a new initiative to help get children who used to have the experience of like watching their parents hold the newspaper open, who don't have that experience anymore, to have a first encounter with the Times that, you know, gets our hooks in them early. So that's one thing we're doing with kids. Another is a whole bunch of work in the film and television and documentary space, where we're making basically Times journalism, but in a new form. And then the largest area is audio. So I oversee podcasting and a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing there. That's what I'm doing. Big pivot point. I joined the Times as I think it's like least important employee was what I like to say. I was like the most junior in the whole organization. And the worst part of it is like, I had no idea when I was joining that's what was gonna, like, I just didn't get it. It's a huge company. I'd worked at a startup. Like I arrived and I was like, wow, I am like 17 people away from anyone who matters. And I hated it. It was awful. I hated my first year. I had this awful, I had 2 bosses. They hated each other. Used to fight all the time. And I was just like, what have I done? But I stuck it out for a year. There were very cool people around. I made a bunch of friends. And on like roughly my first anniversary, my bosses were fired, both of them. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, it was just me. And a really big pivot point for me, because I just like, I think this is loosely connected to being a philosophy major in some way, but I was like so interested in like the work that went into, basically they were department heads and they ran a department of 100 people, and like the company fired them. And then they were like, oh geez, what are we going to do with all these people that work for these 2 department heads that we just fired? And so they put together a small team, and the team's job was like to develop an analysis of what the problems had been, a series of recommendations about what to do, and then to kind of carry that out over the course of the next 6 months is a big transition plan. And that like was the beginning of my real interest and obsession with helping figure out how to do like change management and like new stuff at a journalism company, which is what I've been doing basically ever since. So that was kind of a pivotal moment. Bosses got fired.
Aaron.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron, but you can call me AK. That's what everyone calls me. I work at Mixpanel, which is a company that does big data analytics to help corporations like handle all the data they collect and analyze it, which is the dark side, depending on your view on that whole field. I'm a tech lead there, which means lots of different things. The past year, it's meant research and development as new things are created in the space of technology. We have people like me who figure out if we can use them to make things cheaper or faster. It means information security. So I attack our company and try to make sure the stuff that's supposed to be safe and secure is secure. And I'm something of a fixer. So when someone who spends a lot of money has a big problem, they have to deal with me. But I didn't study computer science, as you could probably guess. And I would say the pivot point for me, I've been working at Mixpanel, which is a San Francisco-based company, for about 7 years. The pivot point for me was actually the pivot to technology from ? Which was my trajectory after finishing Middlebury. And the pivot point was actually, I was working at a market research firm doing like making spreadsheets and like PowerPoint presentations, like right out of college for Middlebury actually. And I remember they were conducting like a survey, like an online survey to like ask like a large population how they felt about a number of different things. And I just remember there was like this ideation session where everyone at this small firm was like sitting around the table and they were trying to figure out like how they should design or make this survey. And I realized as I was sitting there that the people who had a huge stake in the success of this project had no idea what was possible with the technology that they were using. It was like they didn't know how the internet worked. They didn't know how websites at the time worked. This was before mobile applications too. And I realized it's like, well, a lot of people depend on this stuff. And it seems like not a lot of people know how it works. So that was really the rabbit hole. I was just like, can I figure out how this stuff works? You know, I have a degree in reading really hard, dense stuff and figuring it out. And 10 years later, that was an extremely fruitful bet. And I love technology, and I also try to distance myself from it, which is why I live in the middle of nowhere in Vermont. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person. But yeah, that was my big pivot point, was just the realization of, wait a second, nobody knows what they're talking about. Do I want to become an expert? And I was motivated to, and I did.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. I want to follow up and I can't. Mike.
So,
Yeah, Mike.
I am a writer and producer at the Kirk Documentary Group, which is a small documentary company based in Boston. And we're actually based out of WGBH, which is the public television station here. And we make films pretty much exclusively for the PBS series Frontline, which is, I think I'm having an audio issue, but can you hear me still?
We can hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
you sound clear.
Which does long form investigative documentaries. So usually 1 or 2 hour films looking at what's going on in our world today. And I've been doing that since 2003. And as the writer and producer in a small company, you basically do everything from the beginning of the project to the end. So researching it, figuring out what the film is going to be, doing the interviews, then taking all the material that we've got and putting it together in a film. Usually the films take 6 months or 4 to 6 months. And some of them, we're doing one now about Vladimir Putin that they gave us about a week and a half to take some old material that we had and update, which is why I'm not there today. So it's been great to be able to dig in really deep into issues of whatever's going on at the moment. So it's been a privilege. As far as the pivot point, I think it's definitely, I thought I was on a path that I knew what I wanted to do when I was in college, and coming out of it, that I wanted to go into law enforcement. And I actually went to law school after I graduated, and I went to Harvard Law because I got in, and I thought that I was headed in that direction. And I worked after my first summer at the DA's office in Los Angeles on a big investigation. And then as it was getting, and then September 11th happened. And the priorities I discovered of what they were looking for when they were hiring in federal law enforcement and for the FBI and things like that had changed. And so the program that I applied for after my second year of law school, they told me that they weren't really looking for people with a legal background at that moment. This was for the FBI. They were looking for pilots and people with language skills and scientists, and they had sort of changed everything. And journalism had always been something I'd been interested in, and I had done it in college at WRMC primarily, and but some at the newspaper my freshman year. And so I was looked for what could I do, and I had seen a Frontline, and I thought that is pretty cool, and found somebody who knew somebody, and managed to get be able to do an internship after my second year of law school. And when I graduated, that's where I ended up going, but not where I was planning. So
Yeah, interesting. Thanks. Blair, you're up.
Hey, everybody. My name is Blair Bowie. I am a senior legal counsel and the Restore Your Vote manager at Campaign Legal Center in DC. So I am a lawyer, and I run a program that is has the goal of ending felony disenfranchisement. So when folks lose their voting rights because of a past felony conviction, and the approach that we take to that is a combination of providing direct legal services to folks who need to get their voting rights restored, organizing, so doing community work and education to amplify the impact of direct services and train community leaders and organizers on how they can help people in their community get their voting rights restored or figure out if they can vote. And as well as sort of traditional legal tools like litigation, advocacy, and legislative work. And we do that all sort of hand in hand and behind local organizations of formerly incarcerated people, and really try to take their lead in that work. So my pivot point is going to be the opposite of Mike's. Because it was when I actually decided to go to law school. And when I was at Middlebury and a philosophy major, there was this very nasty rumor going around that the natural thing for philosophy majors to do after college is go to law school. I don't know if that rumor still exists.
A little bit.
It's terrible. I did not want to go to law school. I really didn't want to be a lawyer. My mother was a lawyer, and I didn't think that law was an important or necessary tool for social change, which is what I was more interested in. So I ended up doing environmental work and organizing work after law school, sort of traveling all around the country on different campaigns for groups like the Sierra Club or Food and Water Watch. And that, after working on trying to fight climate change and pass a cap and trade bill through a democratically controlled Congress that would not vote on this, I was kind of in my philosophy student mode of, okay, like, what's the problem here? Like, why aren't people on board with saving our planet? And then I learned about money in politics and thought, well, this seems like not how our democracy should be working. And ended up heading back to DC to be a federal lobbyist on campaign finance reform legislation. And I started that job right after the Citizens United Supreme Court decision came down. So I quickly learned that even if we could pass legislation that would get big money out of politics, or make it so that everybody has an equal say in our government, whether they're rich or poor, the Supreme Court was probably going to strike it down anyway. So what we were doing was a little bit in vain. And again, sort of the philosophy student in me was like, well, why does the Supreme Court think that there's something wrong with everyone having an equal say in our democracy? And kind of diving into the underlying like legal philosophy behind the Supreme Court's jurisprudence around money and politics. And that led me down this road of saying, okay, I need to go to law school so I can better understand this and sort of fight in this space. So despite my best efforts, that's where I ended up.
Yeah, wow, thank you, appreciate it. Andrew.
Thanks. Hey, everyone. Good to be here. Andrew Plumley. I am formerly the Senior Director of Equity and Culture at the American Alliance of Museums, which is just a lot of words, but I oversee all of our, what we call DEAI, or diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion strategy, both externally and internally. So the American Alliance of Museums is really the Association for American Museums, art museums to zoos, everything in between, from the Met to small historical houses in random places, maybe close to AK, who knows? And so my kind of day job is overseeing a lot of the programmatic work that we do around what we call capacity building, or kind of equity coaching, training, teaching folks how to be less racist, less misogynist, less all of the phobias, and then internally, our kind of change management, and the thing that we're focusing on specifically is racial equity, because that's the biggest driver of disparity within our own organization and those social outcomes indicators that we can measure: housing, income, healthcare, education, et cetera. And so that's where we focus our specific work. And I got into this work, and the pivot are kind of similar. I was born in San Antonio, Texas. I was adopted by 2 white parents and moved to Burlington, Vermont, so about an hour north of you. And so very different environments. And I always grew up, obviously, being Black in primarily white places. And so I was always in conversations about race, even when it wasn't about race, because race is everywhere. And so I was always just kind of fluent in that sort of conversation. And after I graduated from Middlebury, the pivot point was I was doing some work in higher ed, doing some work for Pell eligible students of color, doing access and success work, which is really supporting students getting into higher ed institutions, and then really creating wraparound services for folks to be successful in higher ed with their experience. I did some of that work, and I got the opportunity to travel across the country with another Middlebury friend, Charlie Taft, and I was able to actually meet my birth parents for the first time at 25. That was a wild experience, and I mean, just seeing someone that looks like you for the first time is wild when you're a grown ass man, you know? So that changed my life in a lot of ways, because I was doing diversity and inclusion work before, but I really got the experience and the opportunity to see where I would have been versus where I was, and all of the privilege and all of the opportunities that I was afforded and awarded by being adopted by chance, by luck, to this specific family at this particular place at this particular time, and then being able to go to Middlebury College. And so when I met my brother and his friends and saw, how I would have grown up, it struck me. And I had to make sure that the work that I was doing was supporting primarily Black and brown folks and other marginalized identities in getting those same opportunities that I was awarded and afforded. And so that's really what got me into this work, to really dive into this work. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but in 2016, 45 came down the escalator, and I knew that I had to go to DC to do the deep work of organizing, and then ended up doing a bunch of work in DC at some racial equity think tanks and other places, doing research and consulting about how organizations shift their cultures from ones that really center white dominant norms to ones that really center racial equity specifically. And that's how I ended up at AAM. So yeah, those were some big pivotal moments for my life, that personal life, that actually ended up impacting my professional one.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Allison.
Man, tough group to follow. I'm Allison. I was class of 11, so with Andrew and Stephanie. I just like to call out that we're the most represented alumni class on this call. I work at this women's health startup called Origin. We're focused on pelvic floor and full body physical therapy, which, like, many of you are probably wondering, what is your pelvic floor? But you have one, and 1 in 3 women have pelvic floor dysfunction. So really focused on both awareness of that and accessibility. I'm our head of growth and marketing. So everything from how do we get new patients, how do we raise awareness about this issue, and kind of thought leadership and brand work around that. I'd say my pivotal moment, like many on this call and probably in that room, thought I was gonna be a lawyer, took the LSAT senior year, was like, oh, I'll sit on this, move to DC. I think my pivot moment was I'd been working in kind of politics at like a think tank and at political startups, and really realized I liked the startup side of things much more than the political side of things, just from like a bureaucracy and just like speed of execution. And ended up applying to a bunch of different jobs kind of on a lark, and landed at Uber in 2013 when I was like, I don't know, 200 employees. And so that was just like a really foundational, good and bad learning process for me over 4 years. And saw that company grow from like, 200 employees to 15,000 when I left. So that was, I'd say, a big pivotal moment. And just also like as my father likes to say about philosophy majors, it teaches you nothing and prepares you for, teaches you everything and prepares you for nothing. And so I think that it really just like taught me a lot of how to think. And quite frankly, like none of my employers really care what my major is. I think it's a lot of just like how you end up applying your skill set. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. So should I ask 2 more questions and then before I open it around? So
Yeah.
We'll give you 2 more. We'll do just 1 more go around, probably the same order since Stephanie's at a break now. She's probably up. Which is, let's see. You can say something about has studied either philosophy or being at Middlebury College. You could sort of like broaden it if you'd like. Translated well into your career. Like, where does it work? Has it worked for you? That kind of thing. And then what advice would you give generally to current students at Middlebury? So has philosophy and/or Middlebury College worked well for you? So how? And then what advice would you give to current students?
Shout out to Steph for taking the first one on each round. So
I'm writing down the questions. So I have that memory. Like, okay. So, I mean, because I work at a company that is primarily staffed with people who write arguments for a living, I feel that my philosophy degree was very related to, like, I think, when I think about the skills of like making a persuasive argument, being economic with words, knowing how to like be like, that was very persuasively said, but logically flawed, like all those kinds of skills that you learn by reading and writing, and studying the reading and writing of others, but also like, I think a lot about literally, I wish I had taken more. I don't know if there was more like logic offered, because
there was
probably
really
I think I only took 1 logic class, so there's probably more logic offered than I took. But like when I think about what I do in a day, I generally like my job involves making decisions with information that's presented to me, teeing up decisions for other people to make, and like reading and writing. Like that's what I do all day. And so to me, I feel like philosophy was tremendously relevant to the sort of things that I do. It's obviously not the substance or the same, it's not the same ideas necessarily, but it's like all the same skills and applications. But that's really different. Like when I first graduated from college, just to say this briefly, like I wanted to be a lawyer. My parents are lawyers. They were like, you can't be a lawyer. And I was like, you can't tell me what to do, but they could. So I took the LSAT, but I did not go to law school. And so I really had like no clue what to do. And I moved home. I grew up in New York City, so I moved home. I had no money. I was babysitting. I was just like desperate for a job so I could move out. So I just took a job as an assistant at a startup, which was like the first job I got. I didn't know what the startup was going to do. I didn't it was not intentional. It was just sort of situational. And what it took to be really great, I had a really great experience there. Ended up like becoming the chief of staff to the co-founders of the startup and like got a real education in startups while I was there. But like being really great at that job was a completely different set of skills. It was about like knowing how to be helpful to other people and like knowing how to like see something that you don't know how to do and like learn it either by making yourself helpful to people so that they'll teach it to you, or like going on YouTube and asking YouTube, like, what is a discount rate? And you know, like, which I did a lot of, and I still do. So I don't know, there are ways in which I feel like a liberal arts degree and being a philosophy major in particular were like exactly the things that prepared me for the job I have now. But I think like right out of college, I found it to be an extremely humbling experience to realize like no one cares about what you think, what you say. Like it's just, unless you do something different than I did, but like going right into the workforce, even if you become a consultant or a paralegal, or you do something kind of like more professional immediately than I did, like I just think it's really humbling, and it's a different kind of set of skills and experiences that you have to like figure out how to teach yourself. So that was really my experience.
Yeah, great. Got any advice for current students? Like, how do they spend their time?
I mean, I just want to say, Plumley and I were texting, but like, I don't think I spent 1 minute of my undergraduate career considering what I would do after my undergraduate career, which like in retrospect is such a poor, obviously choice, and perhaps why I graduated without a job. So I guess what I would say is like, I then spent a lot of time after, like right after college, like exploring, like, what am I even interested in? What are different jobs I could do? What does it mean to be a consultant? Like, can I talk to people who are consultants? Like, is being a lawyer interesting? Like, okay, maybe being a lawyer is interesting in the long term, but like, what about the first 5 years of being a lawyer? Like, anyways, just all these things that like you can learn if you really like put a little time into using the Middlebury network and like just exploring with your own brain, like what different things are that you might do, that you might be interested in. Like, I just did none of that until after I graduated, and I wish I had started a little sooner, because there are a lot of things that you can kind of do to just get your own kind of thoughts going on that.
Nice, thanks. AK, what do you think? Philosophy?
I think, yeah, it's funny. I think my response is going to serve as like a really interesting foil to Stephanie's response, because while she makes decisions about people who write arguments all day long, I sit with software engineers who write code all day long, and they don't know how to make arguments, and they don't know how to write English or whatever language we have to write documentation in. And they can't do this. They can't get up in front of people and present about their thoughts and their ideas. And so I stand out. And I always have in this discipline. And that selfishly has worked tremendously to my advantage, because I get picked for stuff and I get autonomy for stuff. And I think, this is a bit of an oversimplification, and it might be controversial, but one of my experiences of corporate America is that they don't treat you as an ends in yourself. They don't take the categorical imperative and treat you like a human being. They want you to work in a machine, a well-oiled, finely tuned machine. And so often sticking out can be bad unless you can use it to your advantage. And because in 2022, you chose to study something that's a very old discipline where everyone's like, what are you going to do with that? I mean, that's a unique choice today. Especially at a school as prestigious and expensive as Middlebury. And so that actually already said, like the decision, like for the students who are here, you've already made a decision that goes against the grain to some extent. And you all have your own motivations for so doing, but good for you. Use that and find a way to make that an advantage, not a disadvantage, because it is. I think in almost whatever field. I mean, I'm biased because I'm in technology, and I don't know if anyone has talked to a software engineer, but they're usually not the most articulate people, extroverted types. And so when there is someone in that crowd who has that skill set, it was easy for me to use that to my advantage. I can't make the claim that will work for all roles. But I use my philosophy degree every single day because often we design complex systems that need to be usable for human beings who aren't engineers. I mean, if we think about it, it's like it's a miracle. It's kind of a miracle that I can cook myself dinner, even though I have no idea how the stove actually works, right? And so the abstraction that exists, the engineered abstraction is all around us. And like the modern world we live in is built by experts and geniuses. And we just have simple knobs and dials that help us go through our daily life. And there's something terrifying and also beautiful about that. But for me, the actual advice that I would give is if you haven't yet in your 4 years, go deep on something. I find that there's a dichotomy and again, this is in for-profit corporate America. I've never worked for a nonprofit. I've never been in politics. I very much am coping with the fact that capitalism is the way it is in our country, and I'm an at-will employee, right? So I found that there's a dichotomy between once you get past like entry level and middle management, between decision makers and experts. The decision makers make the decisions and they determine where the money goes. And the experts, like Stephanie's a decision maker. I'm an expert. The experts do the research. And I think it's really important to have a sense, if you have a vision of having a 10, 20 or 30-year career, where you want to go. You can change, but way more important than your major is kind of like, do I have the stomach to shoulder the risk and accountability of making decisions that affect hundreds of people's lives, like Stephanie does, my employees, and then my readers? Or do I want to go really deep on some subject that I just will nerd out on for eternity and understand all the internals and not worry so much about accountability, but just be accountable for my own knowledge, my own understanding, and the things that I produce, the things that I create to add value. And so I'm saying this now, having a career in technology for 10 years, I very much tended towards the expert stuff. And I just feel grateful that I had the opportunity to go deep on something and be like, yeah, this is me. I like this way more than like a management or director track. I don't know if that's really helpful when you're still in college and you haven't even seen that dichotomy play out, but trying to give you the benefit of my experience and just my opinion on what I've seen working at many different corporations and being unsure, am I an expert? Am I a manager? And then, in the last 5 or so years, really just committing to one path for myself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thanks. I appreciate it. Mike.
So it's funny, when you leave Middlebury, you leave the liberal arts school, you do get questions about, wait, you were a philosophy major. I was a philosophy poli-sci major, and sometimes I joke, that's true, but I was also a minor in religion. So it's a wide variety of skills that I came out of college with. But the truth is, it's very applicable to what I do. Our job is to take a super complicated issue that's going on in the world or in Washington and to go really deep on it. And we spend, as I said, 4 to 6 months diving into it. And then we're boiling it down basically into 1 or 2 hours. And the thing that makes the films work is finding the people inside it, but it's also finding the ideas that animate them and what is it that they represent. We're not just telling stories about events that happened or even the characters who are in them, though both of those things are really important. We're also trying to look for what is it that is animating it, what's the underlying ideas, what are the forces that are at play in any of these moments that are going on. And that's definitely been the role inside the company where I have been central and sort of even from the beginning was able to go up from researcher and eventually onto the writing side and producing side. But that ability to look at something super complicated and a bunch of events and try to make sense of it and try to figure out what's going on there. But I mean, I'll also say I was quite surprised when I first started, which was, I think I graduated much earlier than the other panelists, but it was in that post 9/11 era. And I was surprised actually at how important ideas and philosophy were in understanding that moment, which was right after September 11th. And we did, I don't know how many films, 20 films about the Bush administration and the war on terror. And in those early days, starting in 2003, and as the invasion of Iraq and all of the fallout from that, there were elements inside the administration that were actually not just had philosophical ideas, that were actually motivated by Strauss and had philosophies that shaped the way that they saw the world. And I was surprised that these events, these massive events, were being shaped by people who had this philosophical understandings of the world, and that to really understand what was going on, you had to understand the ideas that were motivating them and how they were thinking and how they were looking at things. And so it was surprising to me just how not just skills from philosophy, but actual philosophers were playing a role. And even right now, we're trying to figure out, we have another project trying to understand authoritarianism and what is going on and why are we seeing this in the US and in other countries. And reading through, we're just at the very early stages, but reading through and seeing Adorno and these postmodern philosophers come up in these articles that I read back in college. But it gives you a background to be able to jump into it. So I'd say I was quite surprised at just how relevant a lot of it really is. As far as advice, I would say on a super practical level, one of the questions in the journalism world is do you go to journalism school? Do you need to go to journalism school? And certainly my experience has been that that's not necessary, that it's always better to have something that and have, in my case, having gone to law school was very useful inside of reporting, and a lot of the things that you pick up along the way. But the journalism school that I went to really was at Middlebury, though there was no journalism program or journalism classes. As I said, I started writing some articles at the campus, but I didn't really stick with the newspaper because I got really into the radio station, which at the time when I started, I don't know if they do any new stuff now. When I started, they didn't really do too much new stuff, but we started just really ramped up the news department when I was there. And I got to spend so many hours at the radio station making news reports, cutting things together, going out and reporting and putting it all together. When I went abroad to LSE, we started a radio station there, and I was able to be on the inside of that. And that was my experience. That was how I learned journalism, was through that sort of extracurricular opportunities that I had. And it went through law school too, where I was able to do audio reports for my third year paper, which I called an audio documentary. It might be called a podcast now. But take advantage of those extracurricular things, and where you have a passion and you can play around. It's a great time to be able to experiment and do the things that you care about, even if it's not part of your department or part of a formal class.
Yeah, thank you. Blair, philosophy, Middlebury College, how's it translated?
Yeah, so a lot of what's already been said sort of resonates with me, but I think that it makes sense to sort of start for me with like what I liked about philosophy classes. And I think that is that philosophy classes sort of gave me the first opportunity to combine schoolwork and imagination. Like, I think I had thought of these as like diametrically opposed spaces when I was in high school. I would be like daydreaming all class about something interesting that a teacher had said at the beginning of class and like not noticed anything else that was happening. And I really found that like stifling. I was not having a lot of space to like think big about what these little facts that we were supposed to be learning in our classes. So thank God for lacrosse for helping me get into a good college anyway. But then when I got to Middlebury and I started taking philosophy classes, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a place where we can apply our imagination to academic pursuits. And you really have space to sort of think big about like, what would the world be like if it were governed by this other set of values or this other sort of political philosophy or whatever it is, and go down all these hypotheticals in a way that I just love. I think like I picture myself sitting in the library like late at night at Middlebury, and basically I'm doing like my own sort of like speculative sci-fi work. Yeah, I see you nodding, Andrew. Yeah, it's like, it just feels really good. It's a lot of space for that. And so I think that that's something that I've like continued to seek out in
events
in my career. I like the exercise of thinking, okay, macro, like how would the world look different if we were applying this set of values instead of the values that we have now? And then on a more micro level, like how does what I'm doing in my work fit in with that? Does it align with my overall philosophical values? And so some of the things that I sort of think about there, like I already sort of told you the story about how my career was sort of shaped by being like, oh, here's a problem. Okay, what's causing that problem? Okay, let me work on that for a little bit. Okay, what's causing that? What's causing the problem with that problem? Let me follow that thread a little bit. And that's led me to where I am, but it's also given me throughout my career the opportunity to sort of dream big and imagine big shifts in our world. Thinking about, okay, what would the world look like if we abolished prisons, if we totally reimagined our legal system, if we thought about things in a totally different way, and design a job, which I did design this job. This was a post law school fellowship that I designed that lets me build a small piece towards that totally different world. And then sort of checking myself along the way. Well, I have to work within the legal structures that exist. I have to work within the nonprofit industrial complex that exists. So checking myself, does my job generally, even though it is a part of these systems that I don't necessarily like or that I don't think fit in with this broader world that I'm imagining, is it still helping us move in the right direction? Can I still work within this space? And on an even smaller level, like my day-to-day tactics. So another thing I think about a lot is the sort of like nouveau legal philosophy of movement lawyering, and trying to figure out what that means in my day-to-day work. So it's always this sort of like using an imagination to sort of look at where you're going. That's can be really far away from the world we exist in. Again, I think that like a world after abolition is like, that's like sci-fi, that's like speculative fiction to me. And then just thinking about getting there with an approach that is both possible in this world, possible to get paid for, and also to align everything that I'm doing with that overall philosophy.
Nice, thanks. Any sort of direct advice for current students, sort of like take part, or you tell me, Blair. Sort of.
I mean, I think like Stephanie, I didn't like think about what I was gonna do after college.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, if you can sort of do things outside of the box, just do a lot of exploration. I spent my summers at Middlebury working for Circus Smirkus and working as a pedicab driver on Cape Cod. So I didn't know, no one told me that you're supposed to get like internships or whatever. So I just kind of made my own path. And I think that is a perfectly fine thing for you all to do as well.
Yeah. Okay, Andrew, you're up. Philosophy and or Middlebury College and how it sort of translates to your career, or what you find valuable.
I wanted to snap or clap or do whatever with what Blair was saying specifically, because there's a lot of overlap in the way that I think I orient myself to the world with what Blair was talking about. And I think just some advice with what Blair just said around, like, if you have a mind like that, I think one thing that some advice early on in my career and now would be figure out how much you can work within a system and how much you want to push from outside. Because I think we work in a capitalist society. We need money to get things and take care of ourselves. You know, we work in a nonprofit. I work in a nonprofit industrial complex. We work within all of these systems and things that we did not decide for ourselves. So AK was talking about kind of, it's wild that we all use a stove. We don't know how that works. Most people, we all live in social constructs, and we actually don't know how those work either. We didn't just get here by chance. Those were decisions that were made by specific people for specific reasons. And so I think that's how I think about philosophy. And I really think about the work that I do and philosophy helped me do is interrogate stuff, just question everything and interrogate everything, because this didn't happen by accident. So all the bad stuff we can fix, and all the good stuff, you know, that's kind of how, that's my advice, is figure out how much you can reconcile, or figure out ways to reconcile when you're in a position in a system that you're trying to change that you can't just by yourself. And so that was a hard lesson that I had to learn, because it's frustrating, it's demoralizing, it's sad, and you have to keep going if it's something that you're passionate about. So that would be my advice. So I'll start with that, and thanks, Blair, for kind of, you know, kicking that off. And then, you know, to me, I think because of the interrogation things, I've always thought about, you know, why I know what I know, or how do I think I know what I know. And so that is a lot of the work that I'm doing now. I really think about, like, you know, the epistemology and like how, you know, how do we know what we know? And then I really do think a lot about now, you know, like values. These are a bunch of values stacked on top of each other that got us into this social construct. And so some of them work for people and some of them don't work for people, depending on how you look, how you sound, all of these different identities. And my work is really to mitigate inequity in the world, in organizations, and hopefully through broader understanding of society. And so I think, you know, epistemology is one thing that comes to mind. Axiology is another one. Like, why do I value this thing over that thing, which I ask all the time. And I also ask others in organizations to think about why you're valuing this at this particular level and not this thing over here that is, to me, of equal importance, if not more. And those conversations and setting up spaces for people to actually interrogate that is basically what I do every single day, which makes people feel super uncomfortable sometimes. But as I think is a necessary, it's required for anybody that's gonna be out here making decisions in any form. And then I think that ethics comes into my work often because I'm thinking about how do I know the rightness and wrongness of my decisions versus somebody else's in an organizational context, in a societal context. And then I think I was thinking about, the museum world is a weird place because there's like actual museum professionals that like study museum stuff and then do museum stuff all the time. And I came into this very late, but now I get to think about aesthetics and like thinking about beauty and form and how that's actually placed on walls and how museums are repositories for things that we either value, how we value them or not, and what is deemed beautiful and what has good form and what doesn't. So all of those things are things that I wouldn't talk about them in this way in my job necessarily, but these are all things that come into my day job. I mean, literally right before this panel, I was talking with an art museum that was trying to have them understand that there are other artists, but white ones. And so who do we actually believe to be valuable in the art space? And who do we actually show and put on people's walls in museums is a values-based question. And so those are the things that I do most of my day. So I'll end there because I already gave the advice, which is kind of figure out how you can exist within systems that suck.
That needs work for sure. Allison, you're up. Philosophy, Middlebury College.
Yeah. I mean, I will just echo like Blair and Stephanie, Andrew, like I didn't go to career services once. I don't even think I knew career service existed. I didn't know like consulting was a job. I didn't know finance was a job. I like knew none of all these things that people were interviewing for. I was like, no one told me about any of these things. So I graduated, I like babysat for the summer, moved to DC, like was a waitress and like had a paid internship that just paid my like Metro card. So, did not, I would say, it's awesome if you are taking advantage of it. Like, I think that's so great. And I wish I had like thought about that at all. But I will say from a Middlebury perspective, when I moved to DC, I was doing a bunch of informational interviews with people. And I was talking to this guy at like a Obon Pan or something and started my pitch and was like, oh, I went to Middlebury, blah, blah, blah. And this woman came up to the table and she was like, I'm sorry, did I hear you say you went to Middlebury? And I was like, yes. And she was like, are you looking for a job? And I was like, yes. And then she was like, oh, is this an interview? And we both were like,
okay,
no.
That's not real. That is not real. That is not a thing.
Sarah Mom, she gave me her card and I went into like interview and that was my first job out of college. So I was for a political startup. So, and again, like, I think much like Stephanie, like the first job is like, I think there's so much pressure now. And even like when I talk to like younger people or even like people like early in their career, like there's so much pressure. Like if you pick this job, you're like locked into this industry and this role. Like, I don't think any of us are doing like what we were doing right out of college at all. So like, just focus on getting a job, but I don't think it really matters. Like my mother always says like your 20s are about figuring out what you don't want to do. And so I think I really took that approach from a career perspective. And I think philosophy like really gives you a lot of, I'm carrying that into my 30s, but I think philosophy gives a lot of space to like just question, like, what do I like about this? What don't I like? Like what are like, does this organization share my values? Like sort of what is like the life that I want to have for myself? And so I would attribute that like my career journey, both to Middlebury and to like the philosophy degree. And then as I think about like advice, like I said, I would just focus on getting any job. And again, like figuring out what you don't want to do. I ended up getting my MBA because I felt like all things considered, I didn't have a lot of like the analytical foundation that I think was needed as I like moved up into leadership in this like startup-y world. And I spent one summer in doing management consulting. And at that point I was 30 and I was like, oh God, I like within the first week I knew I didn't want to do it, but I like was like, okay, like let's invest time in like, what don't I like about it? I don't like the client services piece. I don't like this like larger org structure. And I really used that to like, after I graduated, figure out what was the right role for me and have like continued to fine tune and just like continue to narrow in on that. But I think like, just don't put so much pressure on yourself. I know that it's really hard not to do that when all these people are talking about like the consulting jobs they're getting that are paying them 6 figures with their bonus, whatever. But I just think, but like focus on figuring out what you enjoy doing, and it'll work out. Like you guys are highly employable. It's the tightest labor market in the last like 20 years. Like you're going to get a job. So,
Go to sandwich shops, talk about your degree. Right. That's
well, if I could, one thing is evident is that you're all really good at critical reflection on your like who you are in the space you occupy, like with others and what it looks like, and then trying to imagine what it could look like differently. Like that's really cool. But not only that, it's like, and then how do I move forward in that, right? Because some people can do the critical reflection stuff, but then they're like stymied, But you're all sort of doing that thing and figuring out where you space, like how you look, how you occupy spaces, and then reflecting hard on it to do something in it. That's amazing. That's really awesome. So I appreciate it totally. So I think we're recording, right? Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna see if anybody in the audience has a question. And if not, we'll go for one more question, one more round, and then we'll probably call it. But let's go see if we've got a couple of students. We've had a number of them and they sort of drifted away. But let's see does anybody have a question for one of the panelists at all? Are you good? I have like 20 questions for each one of you, but I can't do it. Ben, do you have one?
Yeah, it's kind of different than this previous question, but kind of what would you, looking back on it now, how would you adapt like your day-to-day schedule, like as an undergraduate student to kind of transition better into like a work environment, or like maybe be more productive at school, but like what would you probably do on a day-to-day level that would, looking back on it now, you would change?
I have only highly inappropriate answers to this question.
I would concur with that. So
I'm not sure I would do anything differently. I think you should live it up. The feeling of starting my first like 9 to 6 job, how tired I was at 6 o'clock every day. Like you don't need to get there any sooner.
At the risk of voicing an unpopular opinion, I think all human beings in the modern world need to take care of their health. They need to take care of their finance, and they need to take care of their mind, their emotional well-being. And very unfortunately, the education system in this country does not teach you how to do any of those things. And the hope is at higher ed, living amongst your peers, you see how different people live. And that gives you a hint as to different things you could try. We all need to do this. We all need to be healthy if we want to live another day. We all need to have some money so we're not struggling to have our basic needs met. And we need to take care of our mind so we don't lose it. And I think it's really hard to learn those things. Like it just is. And as your life gets more complicated, if you choose to get married, if you choose to have children, like there are all these constraints which compete to like challenge those basic things that you just need to do to live. And I don't have an easy answer, but it's still really hard at 35 to take care of those 3 things for me on a regular basis. And so I definitely wasn't taking care of those things as a senior at Middlebury. And I don't know that now is the right time, but know that that is on the horizon. And in a sense, the thing I loved most about college is that it was practice for anything and everything. Like you have access to tremendous resources, very little responsibility, relatively speaking, and you're young and in your prime. And so, sorry if this is depressing, but I really think that if I could go back and do something differently, I would give myself a lecture on like how I should think about making health, financial well-being, and mental health like priorities in my regular day-to-day life.
That's good.
I mean, I don't know that I have an answer on what I would do different as far as schedule or what I would have done differently, because we were talking about pivot points and that question, and I think one of the reasons that college was a pivot point for me was I liked high school, but I never like you did it and like you did the classes but going to college I think was a point of change, because I was able to discover what really interested me and what I really liked doing. And that was true for classes, taking different classes, and then like, oh, actually, like, I do like reading a lot of stuff and trying to figure it out and sort it out. Like, that's something that I enjoy doing. I said, like, I did the radio station, and like, I found that was something that I really enjoyed doing. And I think if you can find the things that you enjoy doing during that time when the stakes aren't so high, that you can take that out of there, and you will know something about the kind of job that you want to have, or the kind of life that you want to lead. If you can find those things, if you haven't already, that become your passion, that become the things that make you happy, that are the types of things that you could go to a job every day and not be like, this is what I have to do, but this is what I enjoy doing. And I have that feeling all the time that, wow, this is like the cool stuff that I was, staying up late doing back in college, and now I get to do it and be paid. So if you can find that while you're in college, I think that would be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Anyone else? I think, do you have any other questions?
I would just say really quick, and like, I'll say this forever to any Middlebury student. I don't know. It felt like to me when I went to Middlebury, you're supposed to, people were on a hamster wheel before they came into Middlebury. And then if they weren't, they were on one to get to the next thing. It was always work to get to the next thing. And I think everyone on here has said in their own ways, you'll figure it out. But I would say, if you're take stuff off your schedule to allow more space for just being, which I think is mental health in some ways. But I feel like Middlebury provides a lot of structure around the hamster wheel thing. And I think interrogating why you want to be on that, or at least making choices when you want to get on and when you want to get off, I think are important. So that would be my thing.
Yeah. And I would add, I think that may have gotten worse since 2010, or 2011.
That's what I can see.
Yeah. There's a lot more information coming up faster, and people are trying to stay up with it, the speed of it all. So I agree. Yeah, that's good. Can we do one question and just take a couple of minutes to answer this one question? So if people who watch the recording and/or have the one-on-ones tomorrow, just if you could do a short, what's the one thing about my job that I love, or that I really like, or I'm good at? Like, I like, this is the part of the job that when you say what's good about it, I like this. Stephanie, and then AK, and then Mike.
Sure. I lead a team of like 300 people now, and I love that. It is so humbling because my job is really to make other people successful. And when I was young in my career, like, it was all about like what I did that was great. And now nobody wants to hear anything about what I did. And actually, if I do anything myself, I'm generally doing something wrong. And so what I really love about my job, I don't know how great I am at it, but I'm trying to be great at it, is like helping other people to be great and having that be like how I spend most of my time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. AK.
I don't have to worry about anybody else but myself. Manage anyone? I don't manage anyone. I don't take accountability for other people's work. I mean, I work at a company and like I advance a mission and everything like that. And no, like for me, that's awesome, because what I do is I get given a really hard problem and usually not enough time to figure it out, and often with impossible constraints. And so what I love is having eureka moments, and they come through like the toil of doing the work. And the neat thing that connects my eureka moments to philosophy is, at least in the world of software, I always thought of philosophy as like this very long, continuous, giant conversation about the same basic questions of like, why are we here? What are we doing? What does it mean? Doesn't mean anything. And like, when we study these really interesting thinkers, they're always reacting to someone else's work. And so you can kind of visualize it as like a chain of a conversation that happens through time, where people are conversing, essentially, not like we're doing here, but by writing these like voluminous works and stuff like that. And software is actually kind of like that too, because a lot of the code that runs the world is open source, which means if you know how to read code, you can go and see what really, really smart people have done to like push numbers around to like make Uber work as an example, or make Google Maps work, or make email work, or make Amazon work. And for me, often my eureka moments are happening when I'm working with something that someone else made and I get to contribute. Sometimes open source, sometimes closed source, but sometimes like to the broader community of people who will then use my stuff to have their own eureka moments. And to me, like, it's not so much about leaving a mark, but just having satisfaction to be a part of that conversation, which, again, unpopular opinion, I believe technology is what moves human innovation forward. Not that thoughts aren't important at all, but like that is the medium by which like I see the world moving. And I just love to be a part of that and kind of only be responsible, contrasting from Stephanie's answer, to only be responsible for myself, because that works really well for my style and attitude toward life. Thank you.
Yeah, big data is not scary at all, AK.
Not at all. It's all going to be fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, we just have to trust people like you.
No comment. No
No, I'm
comment.
just kidding.
No comment.
Yeah, Mike, what do you love about your job?
I mean,
what part of it?
I mean, I think I think I may have already
Yeah.
hinted at that, but to be
Yeah, you
more
did.
specific at it, you know, I mean, I think the thing I just feel quite privileged to be able to spend, you know, my time during the working day trying to understand what's going on in the world. And, you know, in the very specific moment that we are, you know, I said we were crashing
Yeah.
this film about Vladimir Putin, and we had done a biography of him before. And we spent the end of last week on Thursday and Friday, and I got to, you know, interview 6 people who know Putin and know him, you know, as well as anybody, biographers and reporters and others, and get to talk to them about what is going on in the world, you know, right now for an hour and a half, and ask them, you know, the questions that I have and bounce off of them how we're thinking about it against them. And that's like it's really awesome thing to be able to do. So that's of this moment, that's what I am thankful for, what I enjoy about my job.
Yeah, pretty neat opportunity. Blair, what do you love about your job, or one thing?
I love the orientation of my job of approaching problems from the ground up. I think often in the legal and advocacy space, folks think about problems from the top down and sort of say, you know, this is an issue and I'm going to solve this problem with this policy, or I'm going to go out and start a lawsuit by finding plaintiffs who look like this. And because my job is grounded in direct services, I get to take the opposite approach, which is people come to me and they say, you know, my voter registration got denied and I think that that's wrong, or I tried to get my voting rights restored and I got denied, and I can look at that and say, yeah, there's some misapplication of the law going on here, or there's a broader policy problem. This is maybe part of a larger systemic barrier, and then think creatively about how to fix that. And that's always giving me an opportunity to sort of expand my skills. Recently, somebody came to me who was being prosecuted in Tennessee for trying to get her voting rights restored, and getting bad information from a probation officer there. And I don't work in criminal law, so I couldn't defend her, but I was like, I understand this process extremely intimately because I've helped thousands of people go through it. So I know exactly how it's supposed to work, and was able to advise her and get things figured out to the point where she has been given a new trial, and I can sort of more formally get involved with her defense. So, you know, just having that sort of ability to react to problems on the ground has been extremely helpful.
Nice, thank you. Andrew, and then Allison.
Oh, you're muted.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you're back. You're back.
Okay,
Back.
I'm back. Okay, great. I think what brings me joy most days, or a lot of the time, is when I get to support other individuals in their own learning journey around something that they didn't know before. And there's usually some like eureka moment, like AK said, or something where they actually see something new that's been right in front of them for a long time, and it expands their worldview, and they're able to live and move differently because of that. And that is like the best thing that I get out of my job, and I get to see that quite often. So that's great.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I heard on that podcast how you said the journey, how watching people take the journey about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and where they start from, and then see them embrace it. Yeah, that was cool. That was a really nice little clip on the podcast. I appreciated that. Allison.
Bring us home.
Yeah.
I'll bring you home. I think what I love about my job is I like finally found a job that like where the things that I like to talk about in my like personal time and free time is something I get to talk about at work all day. It's like talking about the gender bias in healthcare. Like I was the friend that's like always talking about painful sex with my friends, and like I get to talk about that at work, and like that's awesome. Like the tagline of our company is "There's no such thing as TMI," and so I have like women, you know, in a business perspective that are sharing their stories with me every day, and that's just, I mean, it's really like emotional, but it's also like really wonderful. And so I think like a lot of my job is external facing, kind of like partnerships and business development, and so like you know that could be really boring if you're talking about like transportation, or I mean for other people, or like food delivery or whatever, and I get to talk about women's health, and so I think that like my passion shows through, and that like helps me be more successful in my job. So I think like I finally got into a place where it's like I'm really excited about like the mission and the values of my company, and that makes me more effective in my role.
Awesome.
That's so sweet. That's so awesome. You are all truly amazing. I thought you were, and that's why you all made the top 6. And I guess I guessed right.
Absolutely.
No, it was really good. I really appreciate it.
No, you're amazing.
Well, maybe.
Be here without you, so
Don't be surprised if I drop in on you. I warned Stephanie I'm going to drop in on the New York Times building and say, no, I know Stephanie, let me in.
Come on down.
But yeah, no, pretty cool. Totally appreciate it. I don't know, Amy, if you have any last words.
I have just one last word, but I first want to
Thank you.
And these are, I didn't say at the beginning, I've done over 40 of these and I never get bored, but I do always appreciate how the language comes through of what you got and how it translated, and yet, so each of these is different, and then but yet the same, and it's great. I forgot to mention, just for you guys, that Allison and Mike need to reschedule theirs, which you could still sign up, and that way we'll make sure that you get on the list to get rescheduled. But I did, and I apologize that I do that. And you guys can hang on, and I'll let you know what your first appointments are, or I can send you a screenshot of your schedules or whatever until Rachel gets a hold of you. But I mostly just want to say thank you again.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
Totally
That was
appreciate
great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah. You guys want to sign up before I?
I'm good right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.